It only took him 9 minutes to pack up our marriage. While I was organizing dinner plans, he was organizing his exit. That morning, I thought the worst thing I'd face was the pork tenderloin thawing too slow. But by noon, I got a text from my neighbor. "Is Spencer moving out? There's a U-Haul out front." My stomach didn't drop. It twisted quietly, precisely like someone rearranged all my organs without asking. I stood up. The chair scraped back against the floor. My planner lay open next to a half-empty mug and a swatch of sage green tile I was debating for a client. Life just continuing. Until it didn't. I stepped outside. The air smelled like damp bark and blooming things that hadn't opened yet. The U-Haul was parked crooked in our driveway. And Jocelyn, his college ex, stood next to it holding a roll of packing tape like she'd been doing this her whole life. She wore my old apron. The one with the rosemary sprigs stitched into the pocket. And she smiled like she belonged there. I didn't speak. Spencer stepped out from the garage holding a box labeled Master Bath, hers. No shame on his face. Just that tired calm he used to get when something was already decided. "I think you already knew this wasn't working," he said. I blinked. Once. Twice. Like I could erase what he said if I didn't react. Jocelyn chimed in soft and earnest. "This isn't about blame, it's about peace." I remember her eyes. They were clear like glass, like nothing could stick to them. I walked into the house. It still smelled like the lavender candle I burned the night before. Half of it melted down, the wax curled at the edges. The granite counter was cold against my fingertips. Noelle didn't come downstairs. She was in her room. 17 years old, headphones always on, emotions always muted. I passed her closed door without knocking. Spencer and Jocelyn followed me inside. She glanced around like she was cataloging my life. The shelf with our wedding photo, the basket with recipe cards, the bowl of keys we never used. She picked up the photo, tilted it. "You can keep the frame," she said. "We'll make new ones." That's when I left the kitchen. Not in anger, not in panic. Just done. I walked past the hallway mirror, didn't look in. Walked past the candle, past the stack of mail I no longer needed to sort. And then Noelle opened her door. She looked at me, really looked. And smiled. Not out of kindness, not out of hate, just relief. And I knew then in some dark little corner of myself that maybe they all felt lighter without me. "She's not just some woman," Noelle said. "She's the mom I always imagined." The words didn't come out in anger. She wasn't yelling. She said it like she was naming a color or describing a scent. Matter of fact. Familiar. I stood by the kitchen island, one hand resting on the cool granite. Only half the spice rack remained, everything alphabetical up to nutmeg. The jars beyond that had vanished. So had the lids to most of our Tupperware. So had the man I married. "She's the mom I always imagined," Noelle repeated without looking at me. The room echoed a little now. No curtains, no rug, no extra chairs. Just my daughter perched on a bar stool peeling the label off a bottle of peach tea like it was a nervous habit. It wasn't. "Did you know?" I asked. I tried to make it sound light, but it hovered in the air like steam from a pot gone dry. She looked at me. "I did," she said. "For a while now." I nodded. I didn't ask how long a while meant. I didn't ask why she didn't tell me. She took a sip from the bottle. There were lunches. A few. She'd take me to that cafe with the lavender lemonade. "You know the one." I did know. I used to take Noelle there when she was small after dentist appointments, before choir concerts. "She said you gave up your dreams to stay safe," Noelle said, still not angry. "She said you design kitchens but never cook anything new. That you pick safe colors. That you stopped growing." I felt something pinch behind my ribs. Not pain. Just something folding in on itself. "And you agreed?" I asked. Noelle shrugged. "She listens. She hears me." I looked at her for a long moment. "Do I not?" Another shrug. "I almost said I raised you. I almost said I cleaned vomit out of your hair at 2 a.m. and cut the crusts off your sandwiches until 6th grade. But instead, I walked to the hallway closet. There were 3 moving boxes left open waiting for tape. Inside one was a pile of old art from Noelle's early school years. I found it near the bottom. A drawing crayon on faded paper. She must have been 8 or 9. I was in a blue cape flying above a stick figure version of herself. She'd written in shaky letters, "My mom is a hero because she makes me feel safe." I held it longer than I meant to. Then, gently, I placed it back in the box, folded the flap down, pressed it until the cardboard creaked. Noelle didn't ask what I found. She was humming now softly. A song I didn't recognize. I left the room without another word. Walked through the empty hallway where our family portraits had once hung. The nails were still there. Tiny silver exposed, like bones under skin. I opened the garage door and sat in the driver's seat of my car. The air inside was stale. There was an old water bottle rolling beneath the passenger seat, and a receipt from our anniversary dinner months ago still in the cup holder. I hadn't thrown it out. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. There was the balance. There were the names on the joint accounts. My finger hovered over the word transfer, but I didn't press it. Not yet. I just stared at the screen, trying to remember the last time I'd spent money on something just for me. He said I was dramatic when I used exact numbers. So I left him $41.23. Not 40. Not 41. Not even 42. 41.23. That was his total contribution to our joint account in the last tax year. A deposit he forgot to label, tucked between a subscription refund and a DoorDash charge. I remember staring at it for a long time one night after the argument about the dishwasher. Me silent in bed, spreadsheet, open the screen lighting the room where we once kissed goodnight. Monday morning I closed out the account. The bank clerk didn't ask why. She just handed me a form, then another. My name felt cold in my mouth as I spelled it out. Holloway. Holo. I paused. Actually, let's just put it under my maiden name. I left the building with a certified check, a thick envelope, and a travel mug I didn't need but bought anyway. Black, matte. Weighted. Downtown Eugene was damp and gray. The kind of Oregon April that made everything look like a memory. I met Mira above the cafe on 10th Street, where her office still smelled like espresso and basil from the kitchen below. She handed me tea before I sat down. No sugar. No questions. "You're not running," Mira said, watching me sort papers. "You're curating your exit." I smiled, but it didn't reach anything. We went through the checklist. Remove Spencer from the insurance. Done. Revise medical directive. Remove his emergency contact status. Done. Cancel shared services, Amazon Gym, Netflix. Done. Transfer my design portfolios to a separate drive. Done. I bought one picture frame from the boutique near Mira's building. Dark walnut. Clean edges. Just one. Not for a wedding photo. For something I hadn't chosen yet. That night back at the house, the kitchen felt wrong. The drawers were quieter, the walls seemed to echo more. I stood in the pantry staring at the space where his cereal used to be. Where I used to organize his grief for him. Label by label. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the box where I kept old notebooks, design drafts, client sketches, and one I hadn't touched since I was 27. The first time I'd dreamed up the warmstone concept I'd later become known for. I smoothed the page. Then I folded it. I signed a lease for a small cabin in Oak Ridge that evening. Mira had found it 2 bedrooms surrounded by trees, no cell tower nearby. The Wi-Fi was spotty. That was a feature, not a flaw. The silence would be mine. The next day I printed the divorce forms, standard Oregon packet. I checked the boxes, filled the margins, and dropped them off at Spencer's office downtown. No note, no memo line, just my signature. And one word at the bottom. Filed. That night, as I settled into the hollow rhythm of a house shedding its layers, I made tea. Same mug. Same lavender blend. Same chipped kettle, different hands. I was about to close my phone when the alert popped up. Jocelyn had posted a photo. Spencer, Noelle, and her. All three of them in matching aprons. Standing in what used to be my kitchen. The caption read, "Family, finally." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I turned off the phone and went to pack my grandmother's china. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't have to. They just stopped using my name. Stopped using we. Started saying she used to her cabin. Past tense. Past relevance. Past wife. The Lane County Courthouse smelled like linoleum and wet umbrellas. Outside November, rain streaked the tall windows. Inside, everything was beige walls, carpet expressions. I sat straight. Hair pulled low. Jacket buttoned. No mascara. Just enough concealer to pass for someone okay. Across from me, Spencer leaned slightly toward Jocelyn. She whispered something. He nodded. Noelle stood between them. Tall now. Beautiful in that effortless way teenagers are. She didn't look at me. The judge's voice was soft, practiced. He read the terms: the house, Spencer's. Primary custody, Noelle's choice. Cabin in Oak Ridge Mine. Savings transferred. Medical decisions separated. Irreconcilable differences. Irrevocable decisions. I signed the final paper with the pen Mira lent me 6 months ago, the one with her firm's name on the side and a tiny dent where her dog had chewed the cap. I slid the paper back. The clerk stamped it, handed it off, didn't look up. And just like that, the story we told for 20 years had its final period. In the hallway, Spencer shook someone's hand. Jocelyn hugged a woman from her yoga studio. I remembered her name once. Dana Noelle stood near the elevator. Phone in hand. Thumbs scrolling. Not once did she turn toward me. I stepped into the lobby. The glass doors hissed open. Rain hit my skin like it was trying to remind me I still existed. I walked to the bench outside, metal slats still warm under the awning. I pulled the last paper from my folder. The official record. Stamped. Signed. Filed. I placed it beneath my mug, the one I brought out of habit, not thirst. The ring from the bottom left a faint circle. Some people keep love letters. I keep forms. Jocelyn came out a few minutes later. She held a small black umbrella, the kind that always turns inside out in wind. "I hope you find what you're meant for," she said, voice so calm it was almost a smile. I turned. "I already did," I said. Then I looked at her, not past her, not through her. Directly at her. "You took it." Her lips parted. No reply. Just the sound of the door hissing closed behind me. I didn't call Mira. Didn't text anyone. I walked 3 blocks in the rain until I found my car. The heater blew warm air against my wet sleeves as I scrolled through my phone. Photos. Albums. One titled Family. There were birthdays, campouts, pasta nights, and pancake mornings. Paint-stained handprints, Spencer's arm around me. Noelle in every frame. I tapped delete album. Confirmed once, confirmed twice, gone. The road back to Oak Ridge was dark by the time I pulled in. The porch light buzzed faintly. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and dried orange peel. My suitcase was still unpacked. Books stacked sideways. No pictures up, no noise. No expectation to fill it. I set the mug down. Took off my coat, and just listened. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. I didn't vanish to punish them. I vanished so I could hear my own thoughts without echo. Without correction. Without being reminded I was too much or not enough depending on the week. The cabin greeted me with the kind of silence that only comes from age. Creaks in the ceiling, dust behind the stove. A faint smell of old nutmeg and cedar. I didn't clean everything at once, just one drawer. Then one shelf. I started in the pantry. The labels were gone, of course. The tape had curled up. My mother used to handwrite them in cursive: wild rice, smoked paprika, canned pears. I peeled them off, gently replaced them with blank ones. Didn't write anything. Not yet. That first week I lived mostly on soup and toast. Cut up carrots, leeks, and a bruised potato. Dropped them into the ceramic pot my mother left behind, its handle's chipped lid still warm to the touch, even after the fire went out. I didn't season it. I let the salt come from memory. The local market in town was small. A man named Carl rang me up. He wore flannel and didn't ask where I was from. He just said cold's coming early this year. Be sure your pipes don't freeze. It felt like kindness, no follow-up. That night I got a voicemail from Mira. Hey, just wanted to say, you sound better. Clearer. Like your voice isn't trying to dodge your own heart anymore. I saved it. Didn't reply. The kitchen felt bigger when I stood barefoot in it. The tiles cracked at the edges. The workbench wobbled. But I started sketching again, just outlines, no labels. Warm stone 2.0 maybe. No one to pitch it to. But I drew anyway. There was a photo tucked into the back of an old cookbook. Noelle. 3rd grade. Gap-toothed smile, fingers sticky with jam. I didn't cry. I just slipped it into the drawer where I kept matches and candles. The kind of place only I would look. I found the letter folded between 2 pages of a lined notebook. The notebook was half full, mostly lists, meal plans, design notes, and 1 page of something half-written. A letter I never sent. You don't owe me love. But I hope you remember it once existed. My handwriting wavered at the end, like I paused, unsure if I should sign it. I didn't. Still didn't. I left the letter where I found it. Didn't fold it again. Didn't tear it up either. It just stayed there between pages of grocery notes and cabinet measurements. Between what was planned and what was real. One morning I woke up to a sound. Not loud, just wrong. It was coming from the old wood stove. I walked over barefoot, the floor cold even through the wool socks. I opened the iron door slowly, expecting ash or soot, but instead a bird. Small. Dark-winged. Its chest heaving. I didn't panic. Didn't flap my arms like I might have once. I opened the cabin door wide, stepped back. Waited. It didn't fly out right away. It perched on the stove's edge, twitching wings, uncertain. The room held still. I held still, and then it left. Straight through the door into the white morning. Snow had fallen overnight. Barely an inch, but enough to soften the world outside. I didn't close the door right away. Let the cold in. Let it bite a little. Just enough to know I was still here. That afternoon I brewed tea. No sugar. Just steam. I reorganized a second drawer, utensils this time. Moved the knives from the right to the left. No reason. Just because it felt like I could. When I opened the mailbox the next day, there was only one envelope. No bill, no catalog. Just handwriting I knew. The loops in the H of my name. The way she still dotted her I like a child, round too high above the stem. Return address, Noelle. I didn't open it right away. I didn't rush inside. I held it in my hand and stood on the porch and listened to the silence again. Only this time it didn't echo back emptiness. It held something shifting. The letter didn't say I'm sorry. It said I miss you. And somehow that was enough. It arrived in late February, but Noelle didn't show up until April. One morning, just past 10, I looked out the window and saw her car. Still the same dent in the back bumper. She always said she'd fix it when it mattered. She got out holding 2 coffees. She didn't knock. Just walked up the porch steps like she used to when she was 8 and carried dandelions in both fists because she didn't believe in picking just one. She handed me a cup and sat on the swing. Said nothing for 10 minutes. I didn't fill the silence. Let the wind speak instead. The porch creaked once. The trees had started blooming again. That soft, wet green kind of spring that smells like hope after a long thaw. Noelle stared at her coffee. Finally, she said, "It's not about who was right. I just miss how it felt before." Her voice cracked, but she didn't apologize for it. I said, "Before is gone. But we're not." That was all. Nothing poetic. No reaching across dramatic voids. Just a truth we could hold between us like the heat rising off our mugs. We didn't talk about Spencer, or Jocelyn, or courtrooms, or who kept what. She didn't ask to explain. I didn't ask her to. Instead, we cooked. No music. Just the rhythm of two people chopping. She sliced zucchini. I peeled garlic. She made a face when I added lentils. Still with the weird health food, huh? I smiled. Still pretending you don't like it. Her laugh came quickly, then vanished like it was embarrassed to stay. That night she slept in the small room at the back of the cabin. The one with the quilt her grandma made. She didn't ask if it was okay. She just curled up early like someone who finally ran out of pretending. I stayed up. Read a few pages of something I didn't remember starting. Boiled more water. Didn't drink the tea. The silence that once felt like exile now felt like breath. When I checked on her, her door was open. She was sleeping with one leg tangled in the blanket, one arm outstretched toward the lamp she forgot to turn off. I turned it off. Left the door as it was. Didn't need to close anything anymore. She left early the next morning. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't linger in the doorway. Just left a folded note beside the sink and her empty coffee cup still warm. The note wasn't long. Just 3 words in her handwriting. This felt safe. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I washed the cup by hand, dried it with the cleanest towel I had, and placed it in the cabinet next to the chipped blue mug she used to call her thinking cup when she was a kid. On the windowsill above the sink, I found something new. A photo. Printed glossy, still smelling faintly of ink. It was of the two of us from the night before. I hadn't noticed she took it. I was slicing garlic head tilted. She was reaching for a pan eyes mid-laugh. The light from the stove gave the photo a soft hue like we were standing inside a memory that had finally decided to stay. She hadn't framed it, hadn't captioned it, just placed it there. I didn't ask what it meant, didn't need to. That afternoon I walked into the main room and stood in front of the blank wall above the dining table. The wall had been empty since I moved in. Not out of neglect. Out of respect for what was still unfolding. I took the photo. Found the small oak frame I bought months ago and hadn't used. No dust on it. Still new, still waiting. I placed the photo inside and hung it on the wall. Not as a declaration. Not as an erasure of the past, but as something else. A re-entry, soft. Unannounced. True. That evening I journaled. Not to chronicle pain, but to give it shape before I let it settle. I wrote, I'm not the villain. I'm not the victim. I'm the person who stayed standing after they both tried to rewrite me. I closed the notebook. Didn't sign it, didn't date it. Some truths don't need a timestamp. Outside the trees moved like they knew something and didn't need to say it. The kettle on the stove began to hiss softly, not urgent, just steady. I didn't rush to it. I let it sing a little longer. Because some endings don't need applause. They just need a quiet place to begin again. Noelle left behind a photo, no apology. Just a quiet look, one that saw me as her mother again for the first time in a long while. I used to think losing a family meant losing everything. But sometimes what you truly need isn't to be held onto, it's to learn how to stay standing after being left behind. No one can erase you from the story. If you choose to live it with quiet clarity. If you've ever felt forgotten by the ones you loved, most remember, real love may arrive late, but it never gets lost. If this story brought someone to mind, a moment of silence, a missed connection, feel free to share. I'll be here reading every word.